You wouldn't survive 24 hours in the Ice Age. Here's why. At minus 42 degrees Celsius, the moisture in your eyes begins to freeze on the surface. Not metaphorically. The lacrimal fluid on your cornea forms a crystalline film in under 2 minutes of direct wind exposure. You cannot blink it away. You cannot wipe it clean. You simply go blind, standing upright in broad daylight. And that is roughly 40 minutes into your first morning in the Pleistocene epoch. The last glacial maximum, which peaked approximately 21,000 years ago, was not a single dramatic winter. It was a climatic state that persisted for thousands of years, reshaping every coastline, every food chain, and every survivable zone on the planet. At its peak, ice sheets covered roughly 30% of Earth's land surface. The Laurentide ice sheet alone, blanketing what is now Canada and the northern United States, reached depths of up to 3 kilometers in places. The weight of it depressed the continental crust by hundreds of meters. The planet itself bent under the cold. Global average temperatures were somewhere between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius colder than today. That number sounds manageable until you understand what it means at ground level in the habitable zones near the ice margins. The periglacial environments, the strips of tundra and steppe stretching south of the ice front, experienced seasonal swings that modern humans have no cultural reference for. Winter temperatures in Central Europe regularly reached minus 25 to minus 30 degrees Celsius. In Siberia and the exposed continental interiors, they dropped well below minus 50. Wind, channeled by the geography of the ice sheets themselves, amplified those temperatures into something the human body simply cannot negotiate without specific preparation. Your preparation, arriving from the 21st century, is almost certainly insufficient. The first physiological failure comes within the first 30 minutes. Your body, sensing core temperature dropping, pulls blood away from your extremities and concentrates it around your vital organs. Your fingers lose sensation, then your toes. The feeling is not pain at first. It is a progressive numbness that most people in controlled studies describe as almost pleasant, a warm buzzing that precedes the cellular damage. That warmth is your peripheral nerves shutting down. Ice Age cold is not a dramatic villain. It is quiet. It is bureaucratic in its efficiency. It files the paperwork on your death while you are still standing. Without wool or treated animal hides, which require weeks of preparation and access to specific tools and knowledge, you are wearing, at best, untreated skin. Raw animal hide, untreated, stiffens in cold air and becomes rigid within hours. It does not insulate. It conducts. The Neanderthals and anatomically modern humans who occupied Europe and Western Asia during this period were not wearing their furs casually. Isotopic analysis of animal remains at archaeological sites like Kostenki in Russia, dated to approximately 37,000 years ago, indicates systematic selection of cold weather species, Arctic fox, woolly mammoth, cave lion, specifically for their pelage density. The preparation of those hides involved stone scrapers, specific curing techniques, and communal knowledge passed across generations. You do not have that knowledge. You have a body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, and roughly 12 hours before that number becomes incompatible with consciousness. The wind is the more immediate threat. The periglacial steppe, sometimes called the Mammoth Steppe, was not a sheltered forest environment. Across the vast Eurasian plain, the absence of the tree cover we now take for granted meant wind moved across the landscape essentially unimpeded. Research on analogous modern environments, the Siberian tundra, the Canadian barrens, documents sustained winds of 40 to 60 kilometers per hour during winter months. At minus 25 degrees Celsius with a 40-kilometer wind, the effective wind chill temperature reaches approximately minus 44 degrees. Exposed skin, your face, any gap in your clothing, reaches frostbite threshold in under 10 minutes under those conditions. That is the National Weather Service standard. In a landscape where shelter requires excavation or the construction of a dwelling from materials you would need to locate, cut, and transport, 10 minutes is not enough time. Your caloric requirements in that environment would be extraordinary. The human body at rest in extreme cold burns between 4,000 and 6,000 calories per day, simply maintaining core temperature. Walking through knee-deep snow, foraging, building, activities that constitute a minimum survival day, would push that figure significantly higher. The megafauna that provided the primary caloric base for Upper Paleolithic populations, woolly mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, steppe bison, giant deer, were not passive resources. Bringing down a mammoth required coordinated group effort, specialized projectile technology, and geographic knowledge of migration routes built up over lifetimes of observation. Hunting alone, in an unfamiliar landscape, with no existing knowledge of animal movement patterns, you would likely starve before the cold finished its work. The caloric math simply does not close. Water compounds the problem in a way that is not immediately intuitive. The Ice Age landscape was not short of frozen water. It was short of liquid water, which are categorically different things. Eating snow to hydrate, a common assumption, actively accelerates hypothermia. Melting snow in your mouth draws thermal energy directly from your body's core heat reservoir. In a person already managing a declining thermal budget, the net effect is an acceleration of the physiological cascade that leads to death. Heating snow requires fire. Building and maintaining fire in those conditions requires dry tinder, difficult to find in a periglacial landscape. Knowledge of friction-based or percussive ignition techniques, and shelter from the wind strong enough to sustain ignition. Each of those requirements depends on the others. The darkness is something that does not appear in most modern accounts. At 52 degrees north latitude, approximately the latitude of modern London, which sat near the ice margin during the last glacial maximum, winter daylight lasted roughly 7 to 8 hours. Usable foraging or construction light, accounting for the low angle of the winter sun across an open snow-covered plain, was shorter still. The remainder was a cold, clear darkness occasionally illuminated by the aurora borealis, which was significantly more active during the geomagnetic conditions of the Pleistocene. The communities that survived in these conditions organized their lives around the management of darkness as much as the management of cold. Storage, tool maintenance, social cohesion, fire management. The hours of darkness were not wasted hours. They were the structural hours, the ones that made the daylight hours survivable. You would not have those systems. You would have the darkness and the wind and a body that began the process of metabolic shutdown approximately 90 minutes after your arrival. The people who lived through this, and people did live through this for tens of thousands of years, did so through an accumulation of knowledge so dense and so specifically calibrated to that environment that modern researchers have spent decades attempting to reconstruct even its broad outlines. The clothing systems, the shelter systems, the food storage and preservation techniques, the navigation across featureless white plains. None of it was improvised. It was inherited, refined, and transmitted across generations with the same seriousness we now apply to engineering or medicine. The archaeological record at sites like Sungir in Russia, dated to approximately 34,000 years ago, shows individuals buried with thousands of individually crafted mammoth ivory beads sewn into their clothing. The labor implied by that material culture, the hours, the tools, the social structures that produced it, speaks to a civilization of cold adaptation that we have no direct modern equivalent for. The ice did not kill those people. The unprepared died in the ice, as they always do. The ones who persisted built a world inside the cold, and they passed it on. 21,000 years later, the ice retreated. The mammoth steppe collapsed. The megafauna that had supported those populations disappeared within a few thousand years, likely a combination of climatic disruption and sustained hunting pressure. The people who had mastered the coldest world in human memory were left to adapt again, to forests and rising coastlines and a warming planet that rendered many of their most precisely developed skills unnecessary. That transition may have been the harder test. But it is the cold we began with, and the cold that defines the outer boundary of what an unequipped human body can negotiate. That boundary, measured in minutes of exposed skin and hours of caloric deficit and days of darkness, has not moved. The Pleistocene is over. The physics is not. End of script.